Welcome to the TheDreadJournal. I am Ulrich Mossberg, and I shall be your guide through some of the most horrifying true stories sent to us. These stories are not urban legends, myths, or tall tales. They are true testimonials sent to us by those who feel they must hide their identities, either due to the question of their sanities or hiding from authorities, both real and from beyond. Despite this, they still want to be heard, and so we have given them a voice. Today, we'll be looking over some of the most terrifying tales sent to us from those who have either worked in a cemetery or visited one, only to learn horrible truths that change their lives forever. Let us look into some of these tales and see what will forever be added into the TheDreadJournal. I've never written anything in my life until now. I'm getting on in my years, and it won't be too long until death claims me. So, I need to share this story with someone, anyone. That's why I sent this to the TheDreadJournal. It'll prove I existed as a man before I turn into something else entirely. My name is Howard Brennan, and I've spent 47 years tending to the dead. I'm 68 now, months from retirement, and there's an irony in that. Spending your entire life caring for those who can no longer care for themselves, only to realize you're closer to joining them than you'd like to admit. Thought I understood death as well as any living person could. I was wrong. It started 3 weeks ago at Oakmont Cemetery in Millbrook, Connecticut. The cemetery board approved opening a new section, land purchased in 1923, but never used. My job was to survey and prepare it for future burials. Simple work. Routine. On the second day, my shovel hit something solid 4 feet down. A wooden casket. But my record showed this section as empty. It was never sold or occupied. I cleared the dirt and found a brass template. Thomas Brennan, 1901 to 1954. My grandfather. But my grandfather was buried in the Brennan family plot on the southern side. I'd maintained his grave for decades, yet here was a coffin bearing his name in earth that should have been disturbed. I walked to his actual grave. The headstone was clean, well maintained, the ground undisturbed. So whose coffin had I found? Every instinct told me to walk away, but I'd spent 47 years opening graves. I'd never been afraid of what I might find inside. Dead were at peace. Bones and dust, nothing to fear. I pried open the coffin lid. My grandfather stared back at me. Not bones, not dust. My grandfather, looking exactly as he had at his funeral back in 1954. His face peaceful, hands folded, perfectly preserved, like he'd been buried yesterday, not 70 years ago. I spent the next week excavating that section. I found coffin after coffin in supposedly empty ground. My grandmother died in 1961, looking as fresh as the day we buried her. My high school teacher died in 1987. My best friend Daniel died 2012. All of them impossibly preserved. All of them with proper graves elsewhere in the cemetery that I'd maintained for years. By the 12th coffin, I couldn't take it anymore. I filled in the holes and went home. I couldn't face the impossibility of what I'd found. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. A man in his 40s stood on my porch in a slightly dated suit. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Detective James Colby, Millbrook Police. I'd like to talk to you about what you found at the cemetery." I let him in, told him everything. The duplicate coffins, the preserved bodies, people I'd known looking exactly as they had when they died decades ago. He listened carefully, taking notes. He didn't look surprised. "I need to see those graves," he said. "We need to document this properly. Will you take me tonight, after dark? Just you and me, investigating quietly." I agreed, though everything in me screamed to refuse him. That evening, We met at Oakmont Cemetery at 10 p.m. The place was dark except for security lights near the entrance. We walked to the northern hill in silence, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The cemetery felt wrong at night, like the dead were watching. I dug up my grandfather's coffin first. Detective Colby climbed down and opened the lid. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "There's nothing here." "What?" I looked down. The coffin contained only dust and cloth fragments, normal decay, as if I'd imagined everything. We opened 4 more coffins. Each one only contained dust and bones, nothing preserved, nothing impossible. I don't understand. They were there. I saw them. "Did you?" Detective Colby asked, and something in his voice made me turn. Detective Colby? When did you join the Millbrook Police Department?" He smiled sadly. "I was a detective until February 14th, 2005. That's when I died." I aimed my flashlight at him. He didn't cast a proper shadow. His edges were blurred, like he wasn't quite solid. "The others are waiting for you," he said, walking toward me. "Thomas and Margaret, Daniel, your parents, they've been waiting for you to join them." He gestured to an open coffin. "Your place is ready. All you have to do is lie down." I ran, and from behind me, Detective Colby called out, "You can't run from us, Howard! We've always been here." As I fled through the cemetery, figures appeared between the graves, glowing faintly, horribly real. My grandfather, my grandmother, my parents, all of them looking exactly as they had in those impossible coffins. They reached their hands towards me, their voices calling out at the same time. "Join us, Howard. Rest with us. You've earned your peace." I was crying and terrified, barely able to see. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I reached my truck. I drove away like the devil himself was chasing me. In my rearview mirror, they stood at the cemetery gates, watching me go. I resigned the next morning. The cemetery board granted me full pension and hired someone out of town. I haven't been back since. But I still see them sometimes, in the corners of my vision, reflected in mirrors. My grandfather, my grandmother, Daniel. They never speak, just watch with patient, waiting eyes. I know there's a coffin on the northern hill with my name on it, waiting for me to fill it. I'm telling you this because I need someone to believe me. I'm not a demented old man. The dead in Millbrook don't rest. They wait between life and death in duplicate coffins, calling to the living. When I die, and it won't be long now, I'll join them. I spent 47 years believing I helped the dead rest peacefully. But the dead of Millbrook never rest. They never have. And they never will. The dead are patient. They have all the time in the world. And soon, I'll join them. My name is Sarah Chen, and I spent 26 years believing I knew who I was. I was adopted at 3 days old by loving parents who raised me in suburban California and never hid the fact that I wasn't biologically theirs. They encouraged me to try and find my birth family if I wanted. So when DNA testing became affordable, I thought it would be a simple journey of discovery, a chance to fill in the blanks, understand my medical history, and maybe connect with biological relatives. Instead, I discovered that some family histories are meant to stay buried. I ordered the DNA test in 2023. 6 weeks later, I received my results. 87% Eastern European, specifically Polish and Czech. But it was the family matches that caught my attention. A woman named Eleanor Kowalski, listed as a potential second or third cousin. I contacted her, and her response changed my life forever. "Sarah, I think you might be descended from the Kowalski line that settled in Ashwood, Pennsylvania in the 1890s. Your DNA markers match patterns I've been tracking for years, but I should warn you, the Kowalski family has a complicated past, and not all of it is pleasant. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor sent me genealogical charts tracing my family back 5 generations to Magdalena Kowalski, who had emigrated from Poland in 1894. But Eleanor's research came with a warning. There are inconsistencies in the records I've never been able to explain. Death dates that didn't match. Family members appearing in census records decades after they supposedly died. Strange notations in church burial registries. She sent me scanned documents showing exactly what she was talking about. Magdalena's birth certificate showed that she had died in 1924, but a church record from 1947 listed her as a witness at a baptism. Magdalena Kowalski, age 76. That decision led me to Ashwood, Pennsylvania. My first stop was to the cemetery where, according to Eleanor's research, several generations of Kowalskis were buried. I found the Kowalski family plot easily. It was a cluster of weathered headstones. The largest monument marked Magdalena's grave, and when I saw the inscription, my skin went cold. Magdalena Kowalski, 1871 to 1924. Beloved mother and grandmother, 1871 to 1963. 2 death dates, carved into the same stone. The second had been added later, decades after the first. I checked the other graves. Several showed the same pattern. Original death dates with second dates added years later. Katarzyna Kowalski showed 1897 to 1942 and 1897 to 1978. Her daughter Anna showed 1960 to 1961 and 1920 to 2004. Someone had carefully updated these markers with new death dates that extended these women's lives by decades. That evening, I found an old phone book listing in my hotel. Helena Kowalski, 412 Birch Street. According to Eleanor's charts, she was Magdalena's granddaughter, which would make her my grandmother. She was born in 1943, so she would be around 80 years old. The next morning, I drove to 412 Birch Street. An elderly woman with silver hair answered, wearing a simple dress that looked like it belonged to another era. Miss Kowalski? I'm Sarah Chen. I was adopted, and a DNA test traced my ancestry back to the Kowalski family. I think you might be my grandmother. Her expression changed instantly, not to joy, but to recognition mixed with deep sadness. Tears formed in her eyes. Oh no. Not another one. Not so soon. She pulled me inside quickly. Before we go any further, I need to know, have you seen the graves? The dual dates? I nodded at her. Yes, that's why I'm here. I thought maybe you could explain. Helena closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. The curse found you. It always finds the daughters. Helena pulled out a leather-bound diary. This contains Magdalena's writings, translated from Polish. She opened up to a specific page and read aloud. I have made the choice that will preserve our bloodline beyond death. One daughter in every generation will become an echo, neither fully alive nor fully dead, but suspended between worlds. They will carry 2 souls, their own and the soul of their ancestor, bound together in one body. Helena then looked up at me, the tears trickling down her eyes. That's why the grave markers have 2 dates. The first is when the woman's original body died. The second is when the echo finally faded, when the binding between the 2 souls was broken. That's impossible. You're talking about people with 2 souls, existing like they were half dead.
It doesn't have to make sense. It just is. And Sarah, you're the next echo. The DNA test awakened the curse. The moment our blood is tested, the moment we seek our bloodline, the fracture begins. What? But what's going to happen to me? Your soul is already splitting, making room for your ancestor's spirit, Kataritsnia, to inhabit your body alongside your own consciousness. Soon, you'll experience memories that aren't yours, speak languages you've never learned. This sounded ridiculous. I looked up at her and I demanded to know, how do I stop it? Helena shook her head slowly, and my heart sank. No one has ever found a way. Magdalena made certain of that. The ritual is self-perpetuating. You can't break it. You can only endure it. I've been fighting for 56 years. I died in 1967. I was 24. There was an accident. I drowned. They buried me. I had a funeral. But 3 days later, I woke up. I've been an echo for over half a century. I exist, I think and feel, but I'm not alive. Not really. I backed towards the door. This can't be happening. You're alive. You're standing right there in front of me. Am I? Helena moved to a mirror. Look, Sarah. Really. Look. I looked at the mirror. Helena's reflection was too sharp, too clear, like a photograph. And behind her, I could see straight through to the wallpaper beyond. You can see it now, because the fracture has started in you, Helena said. I stumbled out of her house and drove back to my hotel in a daze. That night, I searched for Helena Kowalski, Ashwood, Pennsylvania. I found an obituary from 1967. Helena Marie Kowalski, 24, dies in tragic accident. The photograph showed a young woman with the same features as the elderly Helena I'd met. Same eyes, same bone structure, but captured at age 24 in 1967. I searched for 412 Birch Street. Google Maps Street View showed nothing but an empty lot overgrown with weeds. There was no house, no structure, nothing. The next morning, I went to the town hall archives. In church records from 1894, I found confirmation. A ritual performed by Magdalena during her voyage to America. A binding of blood and soul, intended to ensure her family line would never be forgotten. But there was more. Entries throughout the decades documented the suffering. 1931, we have tried every rite, every prayer, every ritual known to the Holy Mother Church. Nothing breaks the curse. 1963, Anna Kowalski asks if there's any way to end this. We have no answers. 1982, Helena Kowalski, still an echo after 15 years. Body repairs itself. The curse will not release her. Over the next 3 days, the changes intensified. I began speaking Polish without meaning to. My handwriting changed to elaborate 1900s cursive. I found myself walking routes through Ashwood that I'd never been to before. Routes that Kataritsnia had walked over a century ago. And I started seeing other echoes. Translucent figures in period clothing. A little girl flickering in and out of visibility. Dozens in the cemetery, tending graves that had been theirs. Helena appeared in my hotel room one evening, now clearly translucent, her edges blurred. It's progressing quickly, she said. Because you searched for the truth. The more you learn, the faster it claims you. Magdalena designed it that way. I looked at her, 56 years of suffering etched into her translucent features. How? How do you stand it? You don't have a choice. At first, you rage against it, but eventually, you realize you're not strong enough to fight an immortal curse, so you just exist. You watch the world change while you stay frozen. I hate her. I hate that Magdalena was so selfish, so afraid of death that she cursed every daughter who came after her. I know, Helena said softly. We all hated her, but it won't change anything. If you ever have a daughter, or if there's another daughter born into the bloodline, then the curse will find her, just like it found you. That's what makes this truly hell, knowing it will continue. The bloodline always continues. The curse always finds another daughter. I left Ashwood and returned to California. My adoptive parents noted something was different, but I couldn't explain it. Instead, I told them that the adoption was the best thing that ever happened to me, that not knowing my biological family had protected me for 26 years, that some bloodlines carry curses worse than ignorance. I told them I wish I'd never taken that DNA test, never opened the door to a heritage that came with a price I'd spend the rest of my fractured existence paying. I made them promise that if they ever heard of another Kowalski daughter, they would warn her not to search for her ancestry. Because I know the curse won't end with me. Somewhere, someday, another daughter will be born. She'll take a DNA test, and she'll discover what I did. That some family histories carry curses that transcend death itself. My name is Nathan Webb, and I've been working with stone since I was old enough to hold a chisel. My father was a monument mason, as was his father before him, going back 4 generations. We carved headstones, repaired cemetery monuments, restored historical markers, honest work that connected us to history and helped families honor their dead. I never thought that work would nearly cost me my life. I'm 43 years old. I've spent 25 years in the family business. After my father passed, I inherited his tools, his client list, and his reputation as one of the best stone carvers in the region. That reputation led me to Ridgewood Cemetery in Ashford, Vermont, a small town of about 2,000 people. The cemetery's caretaker, Douglas Merrick, needed restoration work on colonial-era monuments. Simple work, routine, something I'd done dozens of times before. On my first day surveying the monuments, I found something odd. On the back of an 18th century obelisk marking Nathaniel Blackwood's grave, there was an additional inscription, newer, sharper, and obviously recent. Also remembered, Sarah Mitchell, 1989 to 2024. Taken too soon, now rests in shadow. She had apparently died this year of 2024, a massive gap from the monument's original date of 1789. Bliss examined it. Founding families occasionally add names to their monuments. Extended family, I suppose. But as he showed me more monuments needing restoration, I found other modern inscriptions on 3 others. Jennifer Holloway, 1995 to 2024, lost but not forgotten. Marcus Munson, 1987 to 2024, claimed by darkness. Rebecca Thornton, 1992 to 2024, gone to shadows. All death dates from 2024, all using the same strange phrasing about shadows and darkness, all carved recently. Too deep, too sharp, and far too clean. That evening, I searched online for those names paired with 2024 and the state of Vermont. What I found made my blood run cold. Sarah Mitchell, 23, missing since March 2024, last seen leaving her apartment in Burlington. Jennifer Holloway, 29, missing since January 2024, disappeared while hiking near Ashford. Marcus Munson, 37, missing since May 2024. Car found abandoned, no sign of him. Rebecca Thornton, 32, missing since August 2024. Vanished from a parking lot in broad daylight. 4 people, all missing in 2024, all from the same area, and their names were carved into centuries-old monuments with cryptic phrases about shadows and darkness. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't have been. The next morning, I went to Douglas's office. Those inscriptions, they match missing persons reports. 4 people who disappeared this year. Their names are carved on your cemetery monuments. Douglas's expression hardened. That's quite a coincidence. Look, Douglas, I think something's going on here. Something that needs to be reported to the police. The police are well aware of the missing persons cases. What the founding families inscribe on their monuments is their business. Now, if you'd like to keep this job, focus on the work you were hired to do. If not, I can find someone else. His dismissive attitude only made me even more suspicious. I waited until midnight before returning to Ridgewood Cemetery. I brought a flashlight, a crowbar, and a camera. The office door was old. The crowbar made short work of it. Inside, I searched through filing cabinets and documents. At first, I only found ordinary cemetery business files. But then, in the bottom drawer, I found a leather-bound ledger that didn't match the others. I opened it, and my hands, they started shaking. The ledger contained the names, dates, and locations. The names that matched the missing persons. Sarah Mitchell, Jennifer Holloway, Marcus Munson, Rebecca Thornton, along with dozens of others going back years. Each entry included a date of acquisition, a location where they were taken, and a date of offering. References to something called The Gathering, and notations about shadow that dwells below appeared over and over. The back of the ledger was a list. Members of The Gathering, over 50 names, many with Ashford addresses. Douglas Merrick was on the list. So was the owner of the general store, a teacher, the mayor. This wasn't just a few people. This was an organized cult that had been operating for years, kidnapping people and offering them to something. I started photographing every page with my phone. Then I heard voices outside. It's all right in the office. Someone's inside. Check the door. If it's forced, alert Douglas immediately. My blood turned to ice. I shoved the ledger back, ran to the window, and dove through as the office door opened behind me. He went out the window! After him! I ran through the cemetery, weaving between monuments. Behind me, at least 3 people were pursuing, calling to each other. Block the main gate! Check the east fence! I reached the back fence and scrambled over, my shirt tearing on the iron spikes. I crashed through underbrush until I reached my truck. Douglas Merrick and another man emerged from the trees as I got my door open. Stop! You don't understand what you're interfering with! I floored it. My tires screeched, and in the rearview mirror, Douglas stood in the road, watching me go. I drove straight to the Ashford police station. There was a young officer on duty. I need to report. There's something happening at Ridgewood Cemetery. Evidence of a kidnapping. A ledger documenting everything. The officer's expression changed. not to concern, but to resignation. The gathering, you said? Yes! There are dozens of names, people who have gone missing over the past decade, a list of cult members, including the cemetery caretaker. Mr. Webb, we get this report every few months. Someone finds something at the cemetery, makes connections, comes here claiming there's a cult. Because there is a cult! I photographed it! We've investigated every report. We've searched the cemetery multiple times. There's nothing there. Nothing we haven't already looked into. You're one of them. You're a part of the gathering. Mr. Webb, I think you should go home and get some rest. You're protecting them. That's why nothing gets investigated. That's why evidence always disappears. I was already backing toward the door, then running to my truck. The officer didn't follow. I drove for 2 hours until I reached a town far from Ashford. I checked into a motel and pulled out my phone to look at the photographs. Every photo was corrupted. Black squares with error messages. Whatever I'd photographed had been wiped. I had no proof, no evidence, just my word against an entire town. I thought about going to the state police, to the FBI, but the officer's words rang in my head. We get this report every few months. How many people had discovered what I'd discovered? How many had been dismissed or silenced? If the local police were involved, who else might be a part of the gathering? How far did their influence extend? I didn't trust anyone. For all I knew, the gathering had members throughout the region. Hell, maybe the country. So I left Vermont entirely, sold my workshop and tools, didn't tell anyone where I was going, and drove west. I won't say where I ended up, but I found work as a carpenter. I decided I was done with stone carving and cemeteries. But I still think about those names. Sarah Mitchell, Jennifer Holloway, Marcus Munson, Rebecca Thornton, the dozens of others in that ledger. I had to send this to the TheDreadJournal because someone needs to know what's happening in Ashford. There's a cult operating in that town, kidnapping people and doing things to them I don't want to imagine. A lot of those missing persons reports that you read about, some of them probably end up in places like the Ridgewood Cemetery, their names carved into the ancient monuments as offerings to something that dwells in shadow. I don't know what the gathering worships or what the shadow that dwells below means or even is, and I don't want to know. When you read about people who vanish without a trace, some of them might end up captured by these cults that are just waiting in the darkness. If you're planning to visit Ashford, then please go somewhere else. And to all the stonemasons out there, pay attention to the stones that you carve and restore, because sometimes the inscriptions tell a story far more horrifying than any epitaph should be. If you're enjoying this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get all of our latest videos. And if you have stories that you want to share with us, please send them to me, Ulrich Mossberg, at TheDreadJournal@gmail.com. My name is Tom Kennedy, and I worked as a cemetery groundskeeper at Oakwood Memorial Gardens in southeastern Pennsylvania for 23 years. I maintained over 40 acres of burial grounds, cared for thousands of graves, and took pride in creating a peaceful final resting place for the deceased. There was a reason I left that line of work, and it really has to do with the fact that I learned something while working in the cemetery. Something that hopefully prevents others from falling into the same fate. Ulrich, thanks for letting me share this story. It's been bothering me for a while now, and someone has to know about this. Cemetery maintenance is routine work. Mow grass, trim headstones, plant flowers, repair monuments. It's quiet work that most people find morbid, but I appreciated the solitude. The dead don't complain or make demands. Everything changed in March of 2021 when ownership transferred to a corporate management company. The new regional manager, Jessica Kimball, was 32, fresh from business school, armed with spreadsheets and efficiency metrics.
Tom, I've reviewed your maintenance schedules. I'm seeing significant opportunities for optimization. You're spending 17% more time per acre than industry standards suggest is necessary.
I've been doing this job for 23 years, but apparently some spreadsheet knew better. I figured we'd settle into an uneasy coexistence. I'd maintain the cemetery properly and she'd generate her reports. That lasted exactly 2 weeks. I started noticing that someone else was working my grounds. I'd leave a section with overgrown grass on Friday evening, planning to handle it on Monday. But when I returned, the grass was neatly trimmed, weeds pulled, and fresh flowers planted around headstones that hadn't received attention in decades. No other vehicles were in the parking lot. There was no signs of modern equipment being used, and no indication that anyone else had been there. That's when I found the vintage tools, old-style manual grass shears from the early 1900s, a hand-cranked aerator that looked like it belonged in a museum, a wooden-handled edging spade worn thin from decades of use. Each tool would appear mysteriously near maintained graves, then vanish. The work was impeccable, better than my own, but the flowers disturbed me the most. They were old-fashioned varieties that hadn't been commonly planted in decades. Victorian morning flowers that required specific knowledge to cultivate, like forget-me-nots. When I reported this to Jessica, her reaction was exactly what I'd expected.
Tom, you're concerned because someone is doing free maintenance work? No, someone is trespassing and conducting unauthorized groundskeeping. That's a liability issue. Or it's the community members volunteering their time, which reflects poorly on your maintenance standards. Someone cares enough about Oakwood to improve it without compensation, and you're treating it like a crime.
I left my office knowing that I was on my own. Jessica must have thought I was some old man resistant to change, so she wasn't going to help me. That's when I decided to come back on a Saturday night to see exactly who was doing the work. I parked outside the main gates around 11 p.m. The cemetery was different at night. Shadows stretched between monuments. Old trees creaked pockets of absolute darkness. Around 12:30 a.m., I heard the distinctive sound of manual grass shears cutting through overgrown vegetation, so I moved carefully towards the sound. When I saw him, I finally understood why no one had seen him before. He was barely visible, not invisible, but not quite solid either, like looking at someone through a thick fog. He wore work clothes from the early 1900s, canvas pants, a collarless shirt, a flat cap shadowing his face. He worked with practiced efficiency, trimming grass around a headstone dated 1889 using antique shears. His movements were precise, mechanical. That's when I heard it. As he dug around the grave's edges, something came from beneath the earth. A sound. It was faint at first, but then it was unmistakable. It was sobbing. Quiet. Desperate crying from deep underground. Phantom groundskeeper continued his work, oblivious, almost, to what was going on. He planted more forget-me-nots, patting down the soil, and as he did, the sobbing grew louder. I stepped backward. My boot scraped against a stone. The groundskeeper's head snapped up, his shadowed face turning toward me. His face was weathered, deeply lined from decades of outdoor work, but his eyes were focused, aware, filled with an intensity that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. You shouldn't be here. This is my work. Been my work for 130 years.
Who are you?
Name's William Marsh. Been groundskeeper at Oakwood since 1891. Died in 1924. But the work doesn't stop. Oh no, it can't stop. It's too important.
Work? What work?
Maintaining the seals.
He gestured, looking toward the ground.
They try to leave, you see. Try to rise up and walk again. Can't let that happen. Have to keep them down. Keep them sealed proper.
Sobbing intensified, joined by other sounds, scraping, scratching, as if something was trying to claw its way up through 6 feet of earth.
The dead, they don't rest like people think. They're aware down there, trapped in their bodies, desperate to get out. The flowers, the fresh earth, it's not decoration, it's containment. Every grave I maintain, I'm strengthening the barrier that keeps them buried.
I looked at the other graves he'd worked on. From each one, I could hear the same sounds. Crying, scratching, muffled screaming from beneath the earth. You're keeping them trapped. All of them. Conscious and aware.
Keeping them where they belong. You think death is peaceful? Oh, no, it's not, Sonny. It's awareness without end. They beg to be let out, oh, but if they rise, they'd be worse than what you're imagining.
The sounds were everywhere now. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, all crying and screaming from beneath the earth. Why? Why are they still unconscious?
Because this ground was never consecrated proper. Whoever founded Oakwood back in 1847 made mistakes. Every soul buried here stays aware, trapped in their decaying bodies forever. My work keeps them contained, but it doesn't give them peace. Nothing can give them that.
No. I have to tell people. They have to know.
Know what? That their loved ones are screaming beneath the ground? Oh, go ahead and tell them that, and they'll take everyone up. But you can't save them. Oh, you can only keep them contained.
But I can't just leave them like this.
Sonny boy, you can't help them. No one can. The best you can do is stay away, let me do my work, and be grateful that you're not down there with them.
I ran from that cemetery, the sounds of hundreds of screaming dead following me all the way back to my truck. On Monday, I told Jessica everything about William Marsh, the sounds beneath the graves, his explanation about unconsecrated ground. Jessica's expression went from concern to belief, and finally to contempt. Tom, you need to take time off, maybe see a counselor. What you described sounds like a mental health crisis. No, you don't understand. I heard them, Jessica. Hundreds of voices screaming from beneath the ground. No. You heard wind or animals or your own imagination. You're 57. You've been doing the same jobs for over 20 years, and now you're seeing ghosts. Look, you need professional help. Jessica, you don't get it. I'm telling you the truth. No, you're creating fantasies about why you're the only one who can properly maintain these graves on these grounds and making excuses for it. So you know what? I'm going to suspend you pending a fitness for duty evaluation. The company psychiatrist concluded that I was suffering from occupational burnout and possible early cognitive decline. I was offered early retirement if I agreed to leave quietly. I took it and moved out. I couldn't stop thinking about those sounds. The sobbing, the scratching, the desperate screaming of thousands of souls trapped in their graves. And 6 months later, I saw the obituary. Jessica Ann Kimball, 33, dies in cemetery accident. She had fallen and struck her head on a monument in Section G during a late-night inspection, and the final paragraph made my blood run cold. In accordance with her family's wishes, Kimball will be buried at Oakwood Memorial Gardens. She was going to be buried in the same place where unconsecrated ground kept thousands of souls trapped in an eternal consciousness. I called Oakwood's main office. "This is Tom Kennedy. I used to work there. Tell Jessica Kimball's family not to bury her at Oakwood. Tell them to choose a different cemetery, any other cemetery." "Sir, I'm not authorized to interfere with funeral arrangements. Please, just tell them." "Sir, I'm going to have to disconnect this call." The line went dead. Jessica was buried at Oakwood 3 days later, in Section G. I wonder if William Marsh was there, watching, knowing that he had a new soul to maintain. I wonder if Jessica is conscious now, trying to scream through 6 feet of earth while a phantom groundskeeper plants forgets-me-nots above her grave. On quiet nights, I can still hear them. The sobbing, scratching, desperate screaming of thousands of souls trapped at Oakwood Memorial Gardens. And now, Jessica's voice is among them, probably still insisting that everything can be explained by efficiency metrics, even as she claws at the earth, trying to escape a nightmare that will never end.
My name is Marcos Rivera, and I'm 24 years old. 3 months ago, I was trying to escape a life of gang violence in South Los Angeles, bouncing between shelters and watching my back every time I walked down the street. I'd made mistakes, been part of things I'm not proud of, and I was desperately looking for a way out before I ended up dead or in prison. Then, my uncle died, and everything changed. I never knew my uncle Raymond well. He lived alone in rural Oregon, working as the caretaker of Pinewood Rest Cemetery, a small burial ground about 2 hours outside Portland. We'd met maybe 3 times in my life, always awkward family gatherings where he'd sit in the corner nursing a drink and avoiding conversation. When his lawyer contacted me to say that my uncle had left me the caretaker position and the small residence on the cemetery grounds, I thought it was a miracle. A legitimate job, a place to live, a chance to start over from the life I was trying to escape. And the fact that it was in Oregon instead of LA was a blessing in and of itself. I should have wondered why my Uncle Raymond left everything to a nephew he barely knew. I should have asked more questions about how he died. I should have been more suspicious that the lawyer had seemed relieved when I accepted the position immediately. But I was desperate, and desperate people don't ask the right questions. I arrived at Pinewood Rest on a gray October morning. Everything I owned was packed into 2 duffel bags. The cemetery was small, maybe 3 acres, surrounded by dense pine forest that gave the place its name. The graves dated back to the 1920s, weathered headstones scattered across gently sloping hills. The caretaker's residence was a small cottage at the edge of the property, 2 rooms and a bathroom. Simple, but definitely more than I'd had in months. The lawyer had said Raymond's personal belongings were still inside, and I could keep them or get rid of them according to how I saw fit. The cottage was exactly what I'd expected from a man who'd lived alone for some decades. Sparse furniture, everything functional but worn, a small kitchen with dishes still in the drainer, a bedroom with a narrow bed and a dresser. Books about cemetery maintenance and local history lined the makeshift shelves. But it was the journals that caught my attention. There were dozens of them, leather-bound notebooks stacked on a desk in the corner, each one labeled with dates spanning over 30 years. Raymond had been documenting his work at Pinewood since he'd taken the caretaker position back in 1989. Didn't have much to do during my time off. There was no real internet connection out here, and that was probably for the best. I didn't want anyone tracking me. So, to spend time when I was done working, I was reading through his journals, trying to understand the man who'd left me this unexpected opportunity. The early entries were pretty simple: maintenance schedules, burial records, notes about families who visited regularly. Uncle Raymond's handwriting was precise, almost mechanical, recording every detail of his daily routine. I guess it was something that kept him sane. At least I wish it did. But as the years progressed, the entries became stranger. References to movements at night, sounds from the older sections, patterns in the way the graves settle. There was nothing explicit, just an underlying unease that grew more pronounced with each passing year. The final journal was labeled 2023 to 2024. According to the lawyer, Raymond had died on August 15th in 2024. He had a heart attack, and he was found in the cottage by a delivery driver who'd noticed the mail piling up. I opened the journal expecting it to end around mid-August. Instead, the last entry was dated October 28th, 2024, 2 days before I had arrived. The entry read, "New caretaker arrives tomorrow. Young man, doesn't know what he's accepting. They never do. The cemetery chooses who stays, and it's chosen him. I tried to warn the lawyer, but he wouldn't listen. No one ever listens until it's too late." I stared at the entry for a long time. My first thought was that it was some kind of joke. Maybe the lawyer had written it as a prank, or Uncle Raymond had predicted his death and written in advance. But the handwriting was unmistakably the same as all the previous entries, the precise mechanical script that documented 30 years of cemetery work. I told myself it was nothing, a coincidence. Maybe Uncle Raymond had been confused near the end, gotten the dates wrong. I set the journal aside and went to bed, trying to ignore the unease settling in my stomach. The next morning, I opened the journal again. Below the entry I'd read the night before, there was a new one, dated October 30th, 2024. Today. The new entry read, "He's found the journals. Good. He needs to understand what's expected of him. The cemetery requires maintenance, but not the kind he thinks. Every grave here is a seal, keeping something contained. Miss even 1 day of proper care, and the seals weaken. Let them weaken too much, and what's beneath comes through." My hands were shaking as I read. This wasn't possible. Uncle Raymond was dead. I'd seen the death certificate signed by a county coroner. Yet here was an entry in his handwriting, written today, referencing me finding the journals last night. I spent the day trying to rationalize it. Maybe I had missed the entry yesterday, not noticed it in my quick read-through. Maybe the ink had been invisible and only became visible over time. Any explanation, no matter how absurd, was better than accepting that a dead man was still writing in his journal. But when I checked again that evening, there was another new entry, dated October 31st, 2024. "He's scared now. That's good. Fear keeps you careful, and careful is what you need to be here. The graves in Section C haven't been tended in 3 days. He needs to start there tomorrow morning. Specific flowers, specific prayers, specific patterns. I've left instructions in the supply shed. Follow them exactly, or the seals will fail." I ran to the supply shed, a small building near the cottage. Inside, among the tools and equipment, I found a handwritten manual, instructions for maintaining each section of the cemetery, detailed rituals that went far beyond normal groundskeeping. I spent the whole day trying to make sure that whatever seals were there weren't going to fail. The next morning, I drove into town and went straight to the police station. I needed to tell someone what was happening, get someone to believe me. The officer at the desk looked at me with immediate suspicion. Marcos Rivera, we've got a bulletin about you from LAPD. Says you're affiliated with the East Side Kings, wanted for questioning in connection with... Look. I left all that. Look, I promise, officer, I'm trying to start over, but there's something wrong at the cemetery. My uncle's journals, they have entries dated after he's died. Mr. Rivera, are you on something right now? What? No, I'm telling you the truth. There are journal entries appearing, describing things that are happening. Let me make something clear. You're here because your uncle left you that property, and we can't legally prevent that. But we know who you are and what you were involved with in California. You start causing problems, making up stories about dead men, writing in journals, and we'll find a reason to send you back to LA. Understand? I left the station knowing I was on my own. My past had followed me here, making me unreliable in the eyes of anyone who might be able to help me. Back at the cemetery, I followed the specific instructions like they were the letter of the law. The instructions were specific and bizarre. Certain flowers planted in exact patterns, verses from text I didn't recognize, recited while working, particular attention paid to graves that showed signs of settling improperly. I followed the instructions exactly. Working Section C according to Uncle Raymond's detailed notes. The work took all day, but by evening, I'd completed everything the manual specified. That night, I checked the journal. There was a new entry, dated November 1st, 2024. Good. He's learning. Section C is stable for now, but he needs to understand that this isn't temporary. This is forever. The cemetery doesn't let its caretakers leave. I thought I could retire. Thought I could pass the responsibility to someone else and finally be free. I was wrong. The cemetery doesn't let its caretakers leave. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern became clear. Every morning, a new entry appeared in Raymond's journal, always in his precise handwriting, always describing what I needed to do that day, and every instruction involved maintaining the seals, the specific rituals and maintenance that supposedly kept something contained beneath the graves. I tried to ignore the instructions once, skipping the elaborate ritual for Section B and just doing normal maintenance. That night, I heard sounds from the cemetery, scraping, like something digging from beneath the earth, moaning that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. I ran outside with a flashlight and found graves in Section B had sunk several inches. Earth was collapsing inward, like there was something below that was pulling it down. Panicked, I spent the next 4 hours performing the rituals that the manual had prescribed. I followed each detail exactly. By morning, the graves had returned to normal, and the journal had a new entry. He's learning that the instructions aren't suggestions. Every caretaker learns this lesson, some faster than others. Raymond learned it back in 1989 when he tried to leave after his first week. The cemetery brought him back. It always brings them back. This morning, November 15th, 2024, I opened the journal and found an entry that made my heart stop. It was dated November 22nd, 2024, a week from now. Marcos Rivera's last day. He tried, I'll give him that. Lasted longer than some caretakers, but he made the same mistake his Uncle Raymond made, the same mistake they all make. He thought he could leave. The cemetery chose him, and the cemetery keeps what it chooses. Found in Section F near the 1934 graves. Cause of death? Heart failure. But we both know it really happened.
The seals broke, and what's beneath finally came through. Should have been more careful with maintenance, Marcos. Should have followed every instruction exactly. Below that, in the same mechanical handwriting, was a single line that made me feel like ice water had been poured down my spine. You can't run, Marcos. Your uncle couldn't. You can't either. I'm writing this from a motel 300 miles from Pinewood Rest. I left the cemetery the same night I read that entry, packed my 2 duffel bags, and ran without looking back. But I'm starting to think the journal was right. I can't run from this. The phrase is everywhere now. You can't run. I see it in receipts at gas stations, printed in the serial numbers, in license plates on the highway. The letters arranged to spell CAN-T-RUN in the patterns of cracks on the motel room walls, forming words when the light hits them just right. Last night, I found a newspaper in my motel room. Someone had circled random letters in the headlines. When I read the circled letters, they spelled, "You can't run, Marcos." I'm sending this to the TheDreadJournal because I don't know where else to turn. The police won't help me. My past makes me unreliable. I can't go back to LA. The life I was running from is worse than what I'm running toward. And I can't go back to Pinewood Rest, where a journal written by my dead uncle says I'll die in 3 days. But I don't think I can run from this either. The cemetery chose me, and it's not letting me go. If you're reading this, then please use my tale as a cautionary one. If you ever receive notification of an unexpected inheritance, a caretaker position at a remote cemetery, cottage on the grounds, a chance to start over, please don't take it. Don't make my mistake. Don't let desperation blind you to the questions that you should be asking, because some opportunities aren't opportunities at all. They're traps. And once the cemetery chooses you, you can't run. No matter how far you go, no matter how fast you move, the cemetery will bring you back. Just like it brought back every other caretaker that came before me. Just like it's bringing me back now. I can see the phrase again on the wall of this motel room, written in what looks like dust, but I can't wipe it away. You can't run, Marcos. It's November 24th, 2024. According to the journal entry, I have 1 day left, and I know that with absolute certainty that I'll be back tomorrow at Pinewood Rest, standing in Section F near the 1934 graves, waiting for the seals to break and for whatever's beneath to finally come through. I just want somebody to know my story. Anybody, before I go away for good. However this reaches the TheDreadJournal is not what's important right now. Consider this my last will and testament. I leave the cemetery to no one. I don't want the cemetery to choose anyone else. Because the cemetery chose me, and the cemetery always keeps what it chooses.